We also need to be identifying, like, hey guys, like maybe it's longer hours and you're going to pay them more. You have to show up for your clients.
Are you tracking it? Are you following up on it? Like, especially large losses, like how do you know when it closed? How do you know what the client's experience was? Send the follow-up and reach out.
All right, everybody. I'm joined here by the one and only Stephen Harrington Despotiux, as I like to say, just because it's fun. And today we're talking a little bit about how, different strategies, processes insurance agents do take on with claims with their clients. My philosophy is it's the only time that they use our product. So it should be organized and optimized of exactly how everybody should take it on. Because I know I've been to agencies, Stephen, where when we talk about claims, like everybody's doing something different,
Yeah, there
and
is no consistency.
yeah, it's to like, well, they call it into the carrier. Some people call in, some people harass the claims, adjuster. So I think it's a good topic. And why don't we start off with talking about, hey, this is really the only time somebody uses our product, which is the policy. So, Stephen, what's sort of your philosophy on how agents should, try to tackle claims?
I think that we really need to look at setting a standard because every agency is a little individual, right? So there's no right or wrong answer as long as it's consistent. And that's my first thought. I also go to agencies where they have like a dedicated claim specialist, which sounds so nice, right? Like this person handles the process. We get consistency and it's all on one person. Then a big storm hit or there's a catastrophe of some kind and the person's so overwhelmed they can't even
Handle it.
keep up. and then everybody else in the office is like, I don't handle claims. That's their job. I don't handle claims. I don't handle claims. I don't know what to do. So I mean, I think best laid intentions still need to have a backup as well. Like, hey, like lots of carriers, if there's a disaster happening in an area, they mobilize the claims team and take them to the area, right? It's not like, oh, but I'm not from this area, so I can't adjust this claim. It's like, no, you're getting on the bus and coming with us. Let's go. So I think having that plan in place of this is what a good process looks like, but here's the backup as well in the event of a major event.
No, I think that that's really important. And I mean, here's the thing. I don't know as though a claims person needs to get involved in a glass claim either, right?
Right.
Like there has to be some, and there's a lot of knowledge you can claim from hearing about claims, like what's covered, what's not covered. So there's like a good feedback cycle in there. So, and I think I just want to give the disclaimer, like every carrier might advise you how they want claims put in. You do need to follow that. So
Right.
I know there's some carriers where it's like they'll charge you if you transfer up the claim to the carrier. And, so just kind of keep that in the back of your mind. But I think that, let's start with like the little baby claims, like the fender bender, the glass claim, kind of then talk about the mid-level claim and then the cat claims, like, and then maybe even a topper, we can kind of go into, the tornado hit your town, right?
Right.
Because those are three different areas. So, let's think about this, right? So I have a glass claim or I got into a small fender bender. I'm the client. What, Stephen, do you think is my number one concern, right? Like, how do I want to be treated by my insurance agent?
I want somebody to have some empathy and ask me if I'm okay to begin with. Like, how's it going? How are you? Like a rock chip to a windshield might be a little less dramatic. It's like, oh, tell me what happened. Great, let's get you to where you need to go, or let's get this solved. If it's a fender bender, I think the first thing we forget to do is even just ask, how are you doing?
Are you okay?
Are you okay? And one of my favorite was I had a client call and she's like, hey, my water heater broke and was leaking everywhere. What do I do? And I'm like, well, I can give you the number for claims and the restoration company. We can give you a couple numbers. You're going to need to call and whatever. And she goes, right, but are you coming to turn off the water?
Oh, whoopsie.
And I was like, oh, well, okay, oops. So that's a big learning moment of, did you turn off the water yet? Like, right, the first question is the water still running? Or somebody called with a fire and wanted to know if we were calling the fire department.
No, you should
And I was
call
like, no, you need to hang up right now and call 911. Once they arrive, you need to call me back.
Yeah.
Like,
Don't risk your life.
but sometimes when we take things for granted, or we assume, we get into trouble when it comes to claims. So even with something small, we just need to check in and make sure the client's okay. Are they somewhere safe?
Right.
I mean, you see people on the side of the road all the time calling from a minor fender bender, standing on the side of the freeway, calling somebody.
Hello.
Are you safe? Like, are you in a safe place?
Can we talk? Are you on a roof? No, you're good.
Right.
And I also think people want speed. They want to know what the plan is. They don't want to be inconvenienced by having to go ahead and get their windshield replaced, right? Like,
yeah,
you kind of need to just take it in, and efficiency, I think, on those small claims is really quite your friend.
absolutely.
Then we go to like the middle claim, right? Like a more significant accident, maybe like a slip and fall at work, or somebody's like logging in carpal tunnel and workers' comp, all of the things that need a little bit more guidance. So maybe the person's car, is unusable, or they had a house fire that was contained to the kitchen, right? Very like not a huge catastrophe. People can probably still operate normally and naturally, but definitely maybe they have not had the same experience of being in as many claims on this front, right? So I think when someone calls in, we definitely have to understand that they're emotional, right? If you had a small kitchen fire in your kitchen, even if it's small, you're still emotional, right? Like it could have gotten worse. It just gives you a little checkup. Now you're thinking, okay, well, how is this going to be covered? How does this work? So our first step, I think, is always just to like listen to the person and understand that there could be a wide variety of emotion, from anger to their kid who started the fire to, like somebody who's scared that was kind of a very scary scenario of like you're walk in and you've got this huge fire, right? And maybe you learned that your fire extinguisher was not up to code, So,
or you didn't have one.
Yeah. In those situations, I think insurance agents really have to walk people through the process. So be there. You can still warm transfer them up, but you want to check in and make sure everything's good and that they're all on track at the end of the day. Because those ones are a little bit more concerning. Now you've got maybe people in your house, or you're without your car for a while. And I think, that's when they really need that ear of like, tell me what to do. I've never had a kitchen fire before. Which I guess telling people to put the fire out first is a great step, right? Like just spot on.
You learn through experience. So.
We learn through experience, don't we? So
did we or didn't we?
That's okay. So that's the kind of things I think we have to really be on top of with those mid-level claims, and then find out what their experience was at the end. I love sending claim surveys. So Stephen, it looks like you've got something great to say about claim surveys.
But no, I was going to say, I think we way overthink it sometimes, and we want it to be this like big grandiose survey with 100 questions.
No.
And I think even just the email that goes out that says, hey, can you give us some feedback on your claims experience?
Mm-hmm.
Or, maybe 2 or 3 questions, or a simple survey monkey if you really want to get deep. But I think the simplest is just reaching out or connecting or contacting and saying, hey, what was your experience?
Yeah. And I think it's also good to maybe cycle back to the carrier if there was issues like, hey, this isn't just me. It's kind of, this is the client's perception of it too. Like I've heard some claims, bigger ones that like might have, they're on their like third claims adjuster. That's a little rattling for people, I think, at the end of the day.
I had a minor claim and ended up with 7 different adjusters.
Oh.
That was slightly frustrating, but it all got solved in the end.
As long as it all works out at the end, we're all good in the hood, right? So let's move on to like the substantial claims. These are claims where maybe the person is with their car is totaled, they can't live in their home, maybe a tree falls on it, there's a severe workplace injury and workers' comp, like stuff that's, hey, this is pretty serious. So I do think on all those claims, you need to be actively involved in touching base with people and guide them along the way of what is in there and what's, what to do. I always leaned on, and I'm curious your feedback on this, but I would never tell the person if the claim is covered or not. I kind of like the carrier can handle that because you don't want to overstep.
Right.
And you also don't want to understep. So do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, I think that we have to be really careful. I think a lot of us want to do claims counseling, like should they or shouldn't they submit it? What's going to, do they or don't they have coverage? And I think that that's where we get ourselves in trouble. I think it's like, hey, what happened? Here's your deductible. Here's the next step. But on large claims, especially, I think that we just need to monitor it and follow step by step. And just because they say something is or isn't, normally it isn't, that we don't then go back and review and make sure that their decision wasn't the right one. Yeah. Because they're saying there's no coverage for X, Y, and Z. We, as the agent, may still need to go pull the contract or review the coverage and be like, hey, adjuster, I think that there's a question, or hey, carrier, can you clarify this? Not with the client, not be like, shut up, I'm going to go stick it to them, client. Watch us go together. I think that's a you and carrier conversation, but I think that's also where we get ourselves in a pickle. Yeah. We get fired up and we think that the carrier's unjust, but then we're not pulling contract to review it and we're getting the client riled up at the same time.
Yeah. That's, I think, a really good perspective on it. And I also think, in those claims, you have an opportunity to shine so that you get referrals. And, if you're not living in your home, all your friends, your family know this, right? And they're going to come, how are you doing? How's everything going? And if people don't feel like you're really hitting it home for them, then great news. They're not going to be like, this insurance thing is really driving me nuts. There's a whole bunch of problems here. So I think you also just want to ensure that you take the time to do that. So the final is that the catastrophic, right? Like the tornado comes through, the hurricane, the wildfire, the variety of other things that Mother Nature, the hailstorm, right? And now everybody in your team, and Stephen alluded to this, is now on the claims team. Like, doesn't matter who it is. I mean, I've seen some pretty bad hurricanes where the agency didn't have power, and a lot of people that worked at the agency were now displaced, or they had evacuated because they were in an evacuation zone, right? And your own team isn't sleeping in their own beds every night trying to make it do work with like living at the in-laws, for a couple weeks. And the agency itself might have gotten hit and not, might have a claim. And so in these situations, you really, and I stress this to agencies, you really do need to have sort of a business emergency plan, right? Because when it's going on and when it's like, hey, we got to evacuate, most of your team is going to be like worried about their own family, their pets, their home, dealing with those things. And honestly, like to some degree, that's what they should be doing. But if you have a plan, then it's like, okay, hey, I'm agency owner. I'm going to go out here. I'm going to get a hotel room 4 hours away and work remote just in case. Or we have a lot of agency owners that opt to try to stay even if their area is being evacuated. That's a total decision for you. Okay. Like, I don't know what I would do in those situations. I have a feeling me and America would be in the car and my husband might be there like with a white flag. Like I'm holding my fort, like, and I would be like, great, I'm in a hotel with a spa. And power.
Yeah. What you say is a really good point. I mean, I learned years ago at a small agency, it was me and the owner, and we both had like laptops. We both had air cards or whatever they were called at the time, like the cellular internet.
Yeah.
And we both had trailers, which sounds funny, but we were like, if something happens, if there's a major earthquake in our area, we have to be able to get out of the area.
Yeah.
We have to hope the satellites are working. And then we're going to be able to work from just about anywhere, right? As long as we can get cellular signal or go somewhere with Wi-Fi, we're okay. And if we can leave the area, if not, hopefully we can still work from where we're at, right? But we also had like little battery backups for the computer, and it was a little ridiculous the lengths we went through. At the larger agency, I always had, even when I traveled, my laptop, cell phone, work phone, and a battery backup to make sure that if something happened and I wasn't in the area, I would still be the one that could handle some of the adventure.
Yeah.
Which I don't wish that on anybody, because all I could think of is, thousands of clients and I'm the one point of contact. What do you do?
Well,
you triage.
Actually, to an agency this weekend where tornadoes came through. It happened Friday night. So, the agency owner texted me and sent pictures, and she had already taken on 50 claims herself this weekend.
Yeah.
Now, and these are obviously the catastrophic claims, a lot of ones where it's like, okay, there's a tree, there's this, there's that, might wait till today. But you also have to realize you have to be in a position to pump up your team. Like for the next 72 hours, that agency is just going to be able to take claims,
Right.
and just because the claims calls tend to go a little longer, right? Like everybody wants to tell you their story and justifiably so. And, all the carriers might treat this differently, where some of the regionals would be very like in the know, where you're dealing with a national and they're like, oh, I didn't know you guys got a tornado. Like, cool.
Right.
But I also think it's good to remind people they can come in, you can have water, like if you can have a safe location. If you can't, you have to make sure you're using social media. Like our office got hit too. We are only on phone. Please report this way. So that's why I think that plan is so key, right? Just stopping for a second and saying, well, what would happen if we had to evacuate? What does that look like? And I think you have to remind your team, and this might be a slightly unpopular belief, but I think as long as everybody's safe, your team really has to step up to the plate. Like this is your Super Bowl.
This is what you've been training for your entire career.
Yeah. And I don't know, like I understand that you may have your own personal situations, but my husband was in nursing homes, and so he would have to run the protocol if there was a state of emergency. And the state of emergency could be like a blizzard where the roads, yes, if you were an emergency worker, you could be on the roads, but most nurses also don't want to go fight, a blizzard conditions and risk their own life. So what they would do if they knew they had a shift, because you could lose your license if you didn't show up, is like they would set up like a whole like cots and like have pizzas and food, and the nurses would actually like they might not be working, but they would still stay at the nursing home because one, they didn't want to go in that inclement weather, and nurses can't leave their post. So long story short, but like you can't leave your patients unless your relief comes in. Now there is, a certain number of hours that caps out at, but so they didn't want to do that to their coworkers. So I always think about that. Like, think about it. These people have like kids at home that aren't in school because the schools are shut down, and maybe they're worried if they have power at home, but they had to organize their life to be there for their patients. Otherwise they could lose their license. And they would make it fun. There'd be like movies and stuff like that. But I think what I took away that from an insurance perspective is we also need to be identifying like, hey guys, like maybe it's longer hours and you're going to pay them more. You have to show up for your clients. And obviously if someone's house is destroyed, we also have to show up for them. I'm not asking them to get on the phone and take claims calls while they're like trying to find their, kid's baby album. So you have to identify that some of your own team might be impacted in a catastrophic issue. But anybody who can needs to be there. And I think that version of what can is like, your second cousin's house gets destroyed. I think you still got to be in your desk taking claims, like and those kind of items. So
you would want their agent to answer the phone. So you should probably answer the phone.
Yeah. It's just a challenging situation and everybody can take it a little bit differently. But, when a tornado comes through, you just have to be ready to roll. And that's it. So one of the things we find is because agencies don't always are doing claims differently, they don't have the process. But Stephen, what do we have that can help them?
We have a process pack available that walks you through the questions to think about and answer to create your own claims process.
Yeah, we do.
I actually just went through this with 2 agencies in the last 3 weeks.
I know. It's one of those ones we get a lot of questions of like, do you have a claims process?
Well, and they were like, well, I don't really like this or I don't like that. I'm like, then don't use that piece of it, right? Like make it your own, obviously, but you're also reading the sample. Like it's to get your mind to think and then you fill in the blanks. So,
well, and I think you might start with a claims process and then keep adding to it, right? Like get something normal and natural. And like Stephen said, some agencies do have a dedicated claims person, which is great, but you have to be a certain scale to do that, because, and that does take a very special person. Yeah. It would not be my favorite job. I'm just going to throw that out there.
But then we need the clear process of when there's a catastrophe, we need to have all hands on deck for the claims, not send it all to the one poor overwhelmed person that was the claims department.
Yeah, I agree with that. I do agree with that. So that is my scenario. Anything else to add on claims?
Empathy first, get the answers, get some solutions, and then set follow-ups if the claim is big enough. I think that's the biggest thing is, are you tracking it? Are you following up on it? like especially large losses? Like, how do you know when it closed? How do you know what the client's experience was? Send the follow-up and reach out.
Well, and I think that brings a good point. I think you also do need to go to your carrier websites and look for things that didn't come in through your own door.
Mm-hmm.
Because people do, like, your auto ID card doesn't have your number on it. The claims numbers go into the carrier, or maybe they have the carrier app and they're doing that. So you do need to make sure you're looking in all places.
Yes.
And then I also think too, just educating people about the process, but also that now they've had a claim, they've used their insurance at some point after the claim is closed. And this is another point with commercial, you might want to have someone work to close out claims when it's coming up for renewal. But I think at the end, also educating them, like, let's talk about what's going to happen at your renewal now before that renewal, like we're in the middle of it. Because then you get that, isn't that why I have insurance? Why do I have you people? And it's like, well, yes, but now you're missing your claims free discount. So we need to figure that out.
Yeah.
All right, Stephen. Well, thank you so much for your time today. I appreciate you.
Thank you.
All right, we'll talk to y'all soon. Go get the claims process pack.